All right, we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Career Chronicles. My name is Sloan. I am your host, and we are joined today by Shay Paulson, who I will introduce here shortly. Thanks, everybody who's tuning in live. We love to get your questions and comments in the chat, and we will try to interact with them as we can. If you ask any questions, we'll do our best to answer them live on the episode, and we will showcase them on the screen as well. So please say hi and interact with us in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. For those of you watching after the fact, thank you for being here and for watching the recording as well. Before we dive into today's episode and episode topic, I did want to take a moment to plug our sponsor, Spyglass Partners. This is my team. We are a staffing firm that specializes in full-time and project-based hiring needs within IT, finance and accounting, supply chain, as well as executive searches. So if you need help with hiring, please reach out to us. And I do want to plug Shay's company. We're going to talk about it in the bio as well as the end of the episode probably, but she's the founder of Merit Media. And she'll talk a little bit more about what she does to help different organizations with their web design. She's great. So definitely reach out to her and we'll link her website as well. But without further ado, I want to introduce Shay and introduce what we're talking about. You know, we're talking about entrepreneurship and motherhood. And we really wanted to title the episode, Shay had the great title of The Flexibility Factor Through Entrepreneurship and Motherhood. I didn't have enough room to put that in the full title, but really the key to, you know, entrepreneurship being a great option for mothers is that flexibility piece. And so we'll dive into what makes that great about being an entrepreneur. And we'll dive into how Shay's made, you know, a career out of this and what lessons she's learned. So Shay has over 15 years of experience as a social media strategist, website designer, and event fundraiser. She began her career in the nonprofit sector before starting Merit Media back in 2014. She helps clients. So you've been doing this about a decade, which is great. That's, you know, 2020. Oh, you're at your anniversary. I love that.
Yeah.
And Shay helps clients tackle big goals by breaking them down into actionable steps that generate press and increase revenue. Her strength is building relationships with clients and providing customer service that's tailored to their unique goals. Shay is a Texas native, a Baylor University grad, go Bears, and she currently lives near Park City, Utah. Learn more about her company at meritmedia.net, and I will add that link to the post on LinkedIn as well. So thank you for being here, Shay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, tell everybody how we got connected. This is a good story.
Let's see. My cousin Anna Flagg was one of your first guests on this podcast earlier this season.
Yeah.
And I watched her interview with you, and I'm the older cousin. And so
I love to meet Anna's older family members because Anna feels like a mentor, older sister to me. So I'm like, who's the
incredible friend.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, you know, just because we grew up close to each other and I was 3 years older, she would kind of follow in my footsteps. She's her own person and she's got her own stuff. But I was like, well, this podcast seems
now
great.
You get to follow her.
I want to follow in her footsteps.
I love it. I love it.
So I reached out and asked if, you know, we could chat about potentially being a guest, and the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history, and we connected, and we've been staying in touch and, you know, talking about all things entrepreneurship and motherhood. We're both working moms. Shay has a 3-year-old. I have a 10-month-old. We're commiserating on how to do sleep with little ones. And Shay's got a trip coming up. How many hour car ride is it?
Without stops, it's 17 hours.
Without stops, yeah. So you're going to have some stops. So everybody send their best road trip tips with a 3-year-old to Shay. She's going to need them. But what I want to start by, you know, you start this conversation, you know, I want to know, what is the most valuable lesson you've learned from starting your own web design business? I think people can learn a lot from what you've done.
So, you know, with any job and especially entrepreneurship, there are lessons to be learned every day. I think the big ones that stand out to me are always get a deposit when you start a project. Don't work for free. And I know that because I learned the hard way.
Yeah, these are things we learn the hard way.
Yes. Communicate in your invoice what is expected, what your client is paying for, and when it will be delivered. It doesn't need to be a fancy contract, but it's important to put in writing exactly what you're doing so that you can always go back and say, this is what we agreed to. This is what you're paying for. And I would say, just don't work for free. Negotiate, trade, services, whatever you can do. Your time is valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about this because you've helped me get my podcast up and running. And, we've talked about, maybe having you as a sponsor. There's other things that you can do as bartering. I have a friend who runs her own photography business, and she does this as well, trade services for other people's services. It's like, if I photograph your family, like, will you provide me with, whatever they do for a living? I can't think of a job off the top of my head.
I'm getting chiropractic care.
Yes, for your client. Yeah, like exactly. So there are ways to be compensated that aren't exactly, or don't necessarily have to be a paycheck, but they still are valuable. So I think that's a great lesson. And I know you had mentioned, your scope of work doesn't have to be a fancy contract. You don't have to have all the bells and whistles. It just needs to be laid out in some sort of statement of work that you and another party are agreeing upon so that you're on the same page. Communication is key in anything. We've learned that in a lot of different ways. Joseph did comment that he just did Alabama to New York with 5 kids. So at least you only have the one kid, I guess.
Bless
Joseph, send your tips. We'd love to hear them on how you did that. So I would love to know, we're talking about setting prices and asking for what you're worth when you're running your own business. What's scary about doing that, and how have you overcome that?
Well, it's scary because you probably I started a business because I didn't know anyone else doing social media marketing at the time. It was 10 years ago. So there's a lot.
Yeah, that wasn't
doing that now, but you don't really have any comps to go by.
True.
And so you want to find that sweet spot where you're not the cheapest in your industry, but you're not the
most expensive.
And it's a dance, and I still do it 10 years in.
Still doing the dance.
But there's a lot of great resources in terms of podcasts and other influencers out there that talk a lot about pricing, especially women in business.
I was going to ask you if being a woman comes into this at all, and if there are women in business that you look up to that you've learned from on how to ask for what you're worth. Yes.
Jenna Kutcher is a great resource. She has a podcast. She has an Instagram. Also on Instagram is Janelle Tevis, I believe is her last name, and she's the CEO of Bugaboo in New York City.
Okay.
And then there's one more, the Cabro, Cabro. Her name's Catherine, and she is a Microsoft employee and a mom of 2. And so I've just they're all moms and all women in their industry who are really rocking it.
Yeah.
And so I'd encourage listeners to check them out if they're looking for more resources.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Do you feel like there was a moment, like an aha moment, where, at least as I'm putting myself in your shoes of how I would feel, I would definitely feel hesitant asking for what I think I'm worth, and I would probably kind of tiptoe around it for a little while. But do you ever feel like there was a turning point in your career where you started feeling more confident? I'm just curious if listeners might be wondering, like, is it a specific lesson? Like, I had this client situation that finally got me to that point where I knew I was worth this? Or is it just a number of years in the business that gets you there?
That's a great question. It was a combination of years of experience and then also becoming a mom. Because
I feel that.
If you are paying your sitter $20 an hour, for example, you charging $20 an hour isn't really going to cut it.
Right.
I don't charge $20 an hour.
Because you can't, because your sitter's $20 to $25 an hour.
Exactly.
So it's like, I also, not only do I have the expense of childcare, but I also have to earn a living to pay bills. Like, that's just one of the bills. So it puts it all into perspective.
Yes. And so that, for me to have, this is what it's going to cost me to work this hour. So what is the trade-off there?
Yeah. That's such a good
That
point.
that was a really good kind of litmus test for me. Prior
Yeah.
to having kids and being self-employed, I didn't have as much confidence, but
Yeah.
now my time is really
More
precious
valuable and yeah, precious. Yeah, exactly.
and
We have
limited.
such little time that it
Yeah,
puts, yeah, what you're willing
exactly.
to what you're willing to accept to give that time up
It's a
becomes a much
trade-off
higher
for sure.
threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a side hustle that I was doing that I think pays very well. I love it. I recommend it to people. It's an interviewing gig, and I won't get into it here, but I was doing it at nights, and I had to stop because my nights after work were my only me time. My time is
Yep,
so limited to when she goes to bed at 8. I've got a few hours before I go to bed that is just for me to recuperate from the work day and from
exactly.
taking care of her post work day to dinner and clean up and all that. So
And if you're not
yeah.
taking care of yourself, then you're doing everyone a disservice.
Yeah, and I'm not going to be a good mom or my best mom that I
Right.
can be, and I'm certainly not going to be a good employee at my 9 to 5. I'm not going to show up being my best self. So I had to step back from that, and I'm sure the same as when you're considering taking on a project is it has to be worth your time and
Yep,
your effort that you're giving to it. So that's a really great point. I
absolutely.
also think as moms, we do become better communicators in the sense of we just don't bullshit anymore. We're like, here's what the deal is, and
Yep,
this is how it's going to be. And I feel
take it
like
or leave it.
take it or leave it. I do not care. I've got bigger things. That's every time I encounter a problem in life or a confrontation, I'm like, if as long as Spencer is okay, my daughter, I'm like, as long as she's good,
Yeah,
I'm good.
yeah,
So this other stuff is just peripheral, and it just makes everything else feel less high stakes. And so you're able to say, this is the deal. And if you want to take it, take it. If not,
right.
that's on you.
Yep,
So I think it does give us a little more confidence sometimes. Um, so I
absolutely.
think that's a great reason for moms to go into business because I
Yep,
think it makes us better business people.
absolutely.
Um, I know something I think this is something I think you'll be able to help people with. And this applies to not just running your own business, but, Ann and I talked about this is conveying your value
Uh-huh.
and conveying your impact. What value do you bring to the table? And we have to do this in 9 to 5 corporate jobs when you're asking for a raise or a promotion, or maybe you're negotiating offers. You have to be able to convey your value. You have to do it when you run your own business because you're saying, here's the value I bring and why I'm priced this way. So what's your best tip in conveying your value to prospective clients?
Let's see. I think, um,
Yeah, and you can choose more than one if you need
okay.
to.
Um, I I'm learning, like as we speak, that LinkedIn is really a fantastic resource for tooting your own horn, basically.
Yeah.
There are, I forget the metrics of it, but there's so many users, and I think only 4% of people post regularly.
Oh,
Um,
really? That's
yeah,
interesting. I didn't
yeah.
even know that.
And so if you
Makes
can
sense.
get in a rhythm of sharing your wins on LinkedIn, then you're going to stay top of mind for people. And they may not resonate with everybody, but like last week,
Yeah.
we got $150,000 donation for a nonprofit that I'm working on. Well, I was so thrilled that
Yeah.
I did a little post about it on LinkedIn, and
Yes.
um, it can be really simple.
Yeah,
And
that's a perfect example of how simple it can be.
yeah,
Is just
yeah,
telling the stories of what happened that was exciting to your work life that
exactly.
day.
Yeah,
And those are the stories that I think resonate the most with people. You don't have to have this profound.
nope,
Sometimes I feel like I have to create new thoughts and be a thought leader. It's like,
yeah,
no, just share, what the win was
exactly.
today.
And
Share one win a day.
that's been some of my hang up is, oh, I have to have something spectacular to say.
Yeah.
But I'm working with a coach who is helping me like kind of reframe posting on LinkedIn and really quantifying my wins, because people can't
Quantifying
argue with
wins.
numbers nearly as
Yeah.
much as, oh, they were really good. If you grew
Because
it
they
by
will try to argue with humans as much as they possibly
true.
can. The
Yeah.
trolls are on LinkedIn. They do
Yeah.
not just
Oh,
keep themselves to Instagram. They come out.
yes, absolutely. It's harder to argue with, we
Data.
increased your sales by 50%,
Yeah.
or we had 126% growth on social media views.
Yeah.
So really
Tracking those numbers is so important. Is that
numbers,
something that you have found that's easy to keep up with, or is it hard to keep up with that?
it's
Because it's like you
not,
got to do your actual work and then you have to retroactively track your results and report it. It's a whole
yes,
other layer to running a business.
it is, but if you can make it a part of your routine, like when I take
easier.
on a new client, I like to screenshot all of their social media platforms, and then, once a month, go
Check
back
in.
and kind of just reflect. And
Yeah.
I keep it in a spreadsheet. It's not like super high tech.
Yeah.
But it also, I think reminding clients while you're working with them of your value
Yeah.
and what you're
Yeah. Not
doing,
just prospective clients, but existing clients.
existing clients, because they're like, oh, I'm spending this much money and she's not
Keeping
really getting.
existing clients, I'm in sales too, because I
Yeah.
sell our staffing services,
Yeah.
and building the book of business with existing clients is just as important as finding new ones. And oftentimes it can make you more money is having return customers and maintaining the flow of revenue from existing customers. So taking care of your existing customers and, like you said, articulating your value of what you've brought to them is so important.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're sharing that. I want to talk a little bit about the flexibility factor and why does entrepreneurship make so much sense for you as a working mom?
Sure. Well, I've only been a mom for 3 years, but I've been an entrepreneur.
That sounds like that's 3 times as long as me. So that's a long time.
But I've been an entrepreneur for 10. And initially I got started with Merit Media when we moved from Dallas to Jacksonville, Florida. My husband was going to grad school. I had an opportunity to take on 4 clients, social media marketing platforms. And at first I came to them and I said, I want to work for you. And they said, well, that's great, but you should start your own business. And so they were really the catalyst.
They planted the seed.
Yes, for starting Merit
this
Media.
is what this can be.
And, that worked really well. I could work from anywhere.
Yeah.
And I did. And it was great because we would go on vacation when my husband was out of school, or we'd go visit family. And then, reality hits. It comes back fast when you're out of school. And we moved back to Dallas, and I was able to get plugged into the community there. And that's a lot bigger. But there are a lot more networking opportunities in terms of like Baylor alumni groups or that sort of thing. And so that was really great. And the flexibility now. So my husband is a first responder and he works 48 hours at a time. So with a 3-year-old who's in part-time school, I'm the
Primary caregiver
more often than not. And Adam certainly does his share. It's really hard sometimes.
Yeah, this is something I've seen with a lot of my friends who are moms, is that the trend or the norm is definitely still for the mom to be the primary caregiver. For whatever reason, it seems like all of our husbands have jobs that aren't as flexible. And I don't know, it's a chicken or the egg thing. Is it like, as the mom, the primary caregiver because my husband, his job is less flexible, so I became the primary caregiver? Or do men feel more confident going into these fields where they aren't going to have the flexibility? And women subconsciously know, okay, I'm going to have kids one day. I want to have it. I mean, I knew I wanted to seek a fully remote job back in 2021, and I didn't have a kid till 2023, but I knew in my head, I can't keep traveling as an admissions counselor. I need to be fully remote so that I can be there for my kids. So I was already starting to plan, and not to be, I don't want to assume men don't think that way, but I don't know that they do. I don't know that they're planning, how am I going to set my career up to be flexible to be a dad?
Yeah.
I don't know. None of my male friends have ever said something like that.
Yeah. I think it's becoming a little more mainstream.
It is becoming better for sure. When I look at my parents and my grandparents' generation, for sure.
So it'll be interesting to see, what it looks like a decade from now. A couple resources that are really great are Fair Play, which is a book by Eve
Love Fair
Robinson.
Play. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so she's got tons of resources.
Have you
And
done the
then
cards yet? The Fair Play cards?
I haven't bought the cards, but I would like
I
to.
haven't either. I would
Yeah.
too. We sat down and watched the documentary. That was step number one.
Yeah. And then
For anybody who hasn't watched it, it's great. It's all about the distribution of domestic labor
yes, and
in
the
the
mental
household.
load.
The mental load that often falls to women and men.
Yes.
And it's not to blame men. I think
No.
men just don't often even realize all the things we're juggling and thinking
Yeah.
about. Like
Exactly.
thinking about your car trip. And I don't know your husband. I've never met him. So maybe he's on top of this. But I'm thinking about your road trip coming up. And I bet you're planning ahead of time what kind of stops you need to make for your son, what kind of activities and food you need to have packed in the car for your son. I assume most of that is stuff that you're orchestrating and thinking ahead about.
It is, but I will say he, checked the oil, made sure there was air in the tires, cleaned out the car.
Yeah.
So we have our
There's
own
mental load things that they do that we don't think about. My
Yeah.
husband was out of town last week and I was like, oh my God, walking the dog and taking the trash out, it adds up. I was like, this is not, I don't want to be doing this.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there are things.
Yes. And one thing, because it is my 10th year in business, I've just decided that this is the year I'm going to invest in myself more than I have in the years past. And so I just finished a course by Kelly Nolan, who's a former patent litigator turned time management consultant. And she helps busy women and moms like us manage the mental load. And my biggest takeaway from her course was, calendaring, walking the dog, taking out the trash, so that you're not expecting your brain to remember it. And
so you actually need to write it down on your calendar, whether it's a physical calendar or a phone calendar. Put it down there.
And she's a big proponent of digital calendar so that you can drag and drop things more easily and kind of rearrange.
Okay. That's a lot. That would be a lot of things on a calendar. Like, does she say for dishes, laundry? Like, because it's my calendar will be just.
Her whole point is that white space in your calendar is deceiving.
Totally. Because you think you have way more free time than you do.
Exactly. And she advocates for, calendaring in your commute time if you have a commute, or time to get to the doctor if it's 30 minutes away, just so that you're not surprised.
The time you're going to spend in the waiting room. Like I always have like doctor's appointment on my calendar for 11, but then I'm going to sit in the waiting room from 11 to 11:30, and then I'm going to see the doctor at 11:30, and then I might get out of there at 12:30. You never know. Like it just,
you don't.
You got to. And to bring it back to entrepreneurship, I mean, are you doing this as an entrepreneur? Because I can imagine that much like being a mom, when you run your own business, you have meetings, but you also have all the little tasks that you have to do to keep things running.
I do. And after going through her program and implementing a lot of her suggestions, my head is a lot clearer.
Really?
Yes. So my husband and I share a calendar with his work schedule on it. And then if I'm hosting a girls' night or something, that will also go on his calendar, so that he knows, hey, Shay's got people coming over at 7 p.m. after bedtime.
Yeah.
After Holt's bedtime.
I knew what you meant. Yep. 7 o'clock.
And
the special hour.
So it saves us. I'm not saying we don't talk, but it just saves us like, oh, I didn't tell you that I have this tonight. Oh,
yeah.
So
it can prevent a lot of those little small, they're not arguments, but they're just kind of little riffs of miscommunications that
exactly. And so when tension. I calendar, whether it's a client meeting or a task we need to do, it really has helped us get on the same page. And we're certainly not perfect at it, but I also did a shared note of all the things that we needed to do before we left on our trip today. And so like, we're in there checking things off together, and it it makes we're on the same team,
Yeah. I love that. It feels like you've actually done the work to like get this, you've done all the things that I want to do and you've put them into practice. So I love this. And it sounds like it's making you a better all around. It sounds like it makes you a better partner in your marriage, but also better businesswoman too. Like it makes your head clearer. And when your head's clear, obviously you're going to do a better job by your clients.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. So now that you've been running your own business for a decade. Are there things that would, not that you want to go back to the 9 to 5 workforce, but let's say you did. Let's say for some reason you wanted to be hired as an internal web designer for a company that wanted to hire you on salaried 9 to 5. Are there barriers as a mom that would keep you from going back to a 9 to 5?
Yes. Right now, it's childcare.
Yeah.
We live in a smaller town that doesn't have a Target or a Chick-fil-A.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Now, how far are you from Park City?
We're about 20 minutes from Park City.
Okay. Is there a Chick-fil-A in Park City?
No, there's not. I have to go
no Target.
Opposite direction. Chick-fil-A and Target are 45 minutes.
Salt Lake City.
So mistreated.
It's brutal.
But I walk out of the grocery store and there are mountains everywhere, and
it's beautiful. Park City is beautiful.
The summers are nice and cool,
and you get to ski.
Yes.
So I can't be too. I can't feel too bad for you.
No. And we moved here to be outside more and to raise our son
and your mom is there, right?
In an outdoor community. Yes, she's here part-time, and
that's right.
We've got other family here, so it's good. But we've also, just really made our own community with our church and I joined the Chamber of Commerce, and but
childcare is brutal. Even when you are in a small community where you start to build relationships. Yes. I mean, I'm in my hometown and I have my mom and my grandparents and my husband's parents all available in the city to help with childcare. And it still is a juggling act. There's still things like, oh, the person that was supposed to keep them today is now sick. Yeah. Okay. So now what do you do? Exactly. Or they had a doctor's appointment that came up, or the child is sick. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or they need to go to, their checkup, or, my caregiver needs to go to their own hair appointment or something. There's just stuff that comes up that.
Yeah. And I would encourage people to really think outside the box in terms of childcare and just needing help in general. Like, even if you don't have kids, what's on your plate that you can outsource? And
this is huge when it comes to the domestic labor of like, how can I free up my time? And I didn't share this comment, but Alejandro said, him and his fiance have this imaginary $100 per each placed on their free time. Puts things into perspective, both when you're pricing out your work. So to Shay's point of like, if my free time is worth this amount of money, that's what I'm going to need to charge a client. But it also puts into perspective this idea of outsourcing that I think you were, not to cut you off, Shay, but
no.
What can you outsource to free up your time to go make more money or to have free time?
Exactly. And so I approached this woman at our church who's in her 70s. She'd been working retail jobs. I'd seen her around town. And I just said, do you ever babysit? Would you ever consider watching Holt for us? And she was like, yeah, I'd be open to that. So I had her over for dinner one night. And she walked in and went straight to the floor to play with Holt and Magnetiles. And I was like, you're hired.
Hired.
And she's been such a blessing to our family. And because she was working retail jobs, she was making less than $20 an hour. And I pay $20 an hour.
Yeah.
And so
it was a dream for both of you.
It was a dream for, And she's like, what else can I do to help you around the house? So she does our laundry.
And you were like, yes.
She does our laundry. She unloads the dishwasher.
Like an hour's worth of laundry for $20.
Yeah. I mean, I should really pay her more.
Yeah, this is brilliant. This is amazing.
Like, what else can you do? Or, if you're hiring someone to babysit and the baby's going to bed.
Yeah, then I'll continue to pay you for those hours, but what else can you get? What else can I pay you to do around my house? Yeah.
Yeah. And so she's been out of town for 3 weeks visiting her.
And you're like, come back. Get back here now. Yeah.
So I would encourage anyone who's listening, like, think outside the box,
Yeah. And build community. I think that's what you've done, is build community in your neighborhood and in your area, your town, and, becoming this is not just an employment engagement for this individual. It sounds like she's someone that you've built a connection with too. And so this is an opportunity for her to get to spend time with your family and with Holt, and it's good for everybody involved.
We consider her a part of our family, and
be creative about what you do to take care of this domestic load.
Exactly.
I want to ask you two more questions.
Okay.
I want to be cognizant of time. We're already at 30 minutes, but I do love this question of how do you feel like being a working mom makes you a better mom and a better professional?
I think we've kind of touched on this, but I'm just a lot more cognizant of how I spend my time.
Yeah.
I still scroll. I get caught doom scrolling and in the rabbit hole of Facebook and Instagram.
Me too.
I am not immune
Nobody is.
by any means, but I will say that, having my free times drastically condensed makes me maximize all of that time. Whether it's not just to like be productive. It's like, okay, I have 1 hour that I'm going to put my phone away and I'm going to play with my son and talk with my husband. We're going to listen to music.
Yeah.
And that is our family time. It's not a ton of time, but it's better than nothing.
But it's an hour. Yeah. I'm the same. We're the same way.
Yeah.
It makes you more, I think it makes us more present. It makes you more mindful, more present. And from a professional setting, I think it can make you, I want to be wrapped up by the time my childcare is up. So if I have to pick my daughter up at 4:35, whatever it is, I want to get as much work done so that I'm, I can shut work off for the day and be present with my daughter. So it makes you definitely more efficient and more productive at work, I think.
I have long since held that, like, if I ever need to hire
moms.
Hire moms.
Hire moms, because we get the job done.
Yep.
And I've been wanting to make a LinkedIn post about like, don't even bother asking moms about how they handle multitasking or juggling multiple responsibilities at once or time management. Like, you can skip those questions. You'll be good. Just hire her. And then the last question I always ask everybody is, when or where have you felt most empowered as a woman?
Ooh.
It's a toughie.
This was a while ago when we lived in Florida. Before we had kids, there was a woman in our church who was in a really bad living situation. And I was able to navigate the social system for her. She was nearly 60 years old, had a disability, had never actually been diagnosed. And so she was really eligible for quite a lot of services once she got the diagnosis. But we got her on food stamps. We got her connected with legal aid. We got her a job at Publix. And she was better off when we left than when I found her.
Right.
And that experience, it didn't end the best because the social worker actually turned her against me and was like, well, this girl just but even though it ended that way, like, I look back and think I did my best. I made a difference for somebody who couldn't do that on their own. And that is what empowers me to go throughout my day.
Yeah. Well, I see a connection to that in the work that you do. You come in and you want to see, how can I leave people's social media and website strategy better than when I found it? And that's what makes you excited to get out of the bed each day. So you're in kind of the perfect business of like, really making an impact on people's livelihoods. I think that's a common theme right there for sure. Well, amazing. Well, thank you, Shay, for your time. I'm going to tag Merit Media. So if you guys listening need any help with your social media or website strategy, please reach out to Shay. She is a delight to work with. And if you guys have any follow-up questions for the conversation we had today, please reach out to either one of us. We're both making an effort to be present on LinkedIn.
That's right.
And in real life.
Yes.
We're doing the best we can. Awesome. Well, thanks, Shay. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sloan.
Bye.
Bye.